Hello everyone. It's been about a week since I uploaded my last video, which was quite long. If you haven't seen it, the Y2K video, I would definitely recommend checking it out. I'm very happy with the feedback that I've gotten so far on it. It seems like a lot of people out there who've seen it are really enjoying it. And of course the video was 2 hours long, so it took a lot of time. But we're not going to take a lot of time to do this video. It's another tier list that I'm putting out there for you guys. This is going to be on the Ace Attorney games, which is a franchise that I've always been a big fan of since the DS days. I think these games really helped open up not just myself, but other people to a lot of Japanese-style puzzle games and visual novels and that sort of thing. And so they always kind of hold a special place for me because of that. And I think in a lot of ways, other games in the genre that I've played, they've not really lived up to this standard, personally. But I'm by no means an expert in all of that stuff. So the thing about these games is that they are very segmented, into different cases, different mysteries that have to be solved. And it was kind of tempting to maybe, instead of doing a games tier list, to do a tier list just based on the cases. However, that would be kind of difficult to do since there are so many different cases from different games which have different mechanics and different story quirks. So I will present that to you here. If you want to take a look at it, you can see it. But it's probably not going to make sense to you if you haven't played these games, because you're not going to know what happens in any of these cases, and I'm not really interested in spoiling them, because that's the whole point of the game. But here's my list of cases, and I'm kind of using this list to grade the games. The placement of overall cases will factor into that. But that said, in my opinion, there's not really a huge difference in quality between these games, so there's not really going to be a lot of different tiers. I like all of these games quite a bit. Even the games on this list that might be in the lowest tier, I don't think you shouldn't play. Maybe they shouldn't be the first one that you play if that's how you want to do it, but they were worth my time in my opinion. Also, additional rule, there are a few of these games that have not been released in English. There are some rumors that some of the games that are not yet in English will be released, but we don't really know if any of those rumors are true, and I'm tired of sitting around waiting for rumors to come true, personally, especially when it comes to this franchise, because that's sort of been a frustrating issue with Capcom, not porting certain games for no real reason, in my opinion. Either way, let's just move along and do this list. So, of course, the very first game on this list is the original Ace Attorney. It was originally a Game Boy Advance game and it was ported to the DS with additional content. That's the version that we got. I think this game is pretty great. The way that it's paced compared to some of the later games is a bit better. Things happen pretty quickly in this game comparison to some of the later ones, which I've always found kind of interesting. I think it's a very accessible game. The original 3 games were released in a collection, so you're going to get them all anyway together. But I think the collection is definitely worth your time, even if you're not normally into puzzle games. But yeah, great game. Nice characters, of course. Nice mysteries. Music, of course, very catchy. This is a quintessential narrative puzzle game, in my opinion. And it's definitely worth checking out for anybody who hasn't. But it was quickly followed up by the sequel, Justice for All, which is a game that I think gets kind of a bad rap. I think that a lot of cases in this game, it's weird. When I talk to people about this game, they seem to forget which cases were even in it. So they don't find the game terribly memorable. But then when I mention certain cases to them, they're like, oh, I thought that was in the 3rd game, or the 1st game. It's like, for some reason, they can't really recall this game, but they can recall some of the actual cases from it, which I think is weird, because I don't really think there's a big difference in quality between this and the first one. I think that the characters, the new characters and the old characters who return, were handled well. I think we get more backstory on certain characters, and of course, we have our first flying case, which kind of is a meme. You have to prove that someone didn't fly or whatever. That's a classic to me. And the final case in this game is also really strong as well. Really, my only issues with this game are that I guess some of the later cases, especially the final case, is very, very long and kind of oddly paced. And I don't think this really matters anymore, but at the time I was frustrated because when they remade the original game, they added a 5th case. And that case is very, very long. but you can tell that a lot of effort went into making new game mechanics for it. And there was really no such equivalent for this game. So I was kind of always annoyed that we didn't get any extra content, but looking back on it, I don't really think that it matters personally. So I am putting this in A tier. We are also going to talk about the third one in the trilogy. This personally is my favorite of all of the games. It does not really introduce any new mechanics, which I think you could say is a criticism. That's not really that important because to me, this game had a really great story because it chose to focus more on the characters. So we got a lot of background into Phoenix Wright and his past and the past of other characters who've been in it since the beginning. And that just made it really compelling, especially as you get to the finale. It really did feel like a good way to close out a trilogy of sorts, even though these games didn't really have a running storyline or anything like that. It just felt like a really great way to end it. Yeah, all the other cases I think are really strong. The second case, the mask-to-mask case, I think people kind of sell that one a bit short. I think it is probably the weakest case in this game, but I still think that it is a lot of fun. The third case is hilarious. That might be one of my favorite cases in the whole franchise, honestly. So I'm a big fan of that. But yeah, like I said before, all three of these games you can get in a pack together. So I would keep an eye on that because I think it goes on sale quite a bit. I haven't bought it because I still have all the DS games, so I haven't really had a need to do that. If they ever did like a true HD version of these games or something with like voice acting, I'd buy it in a second. Capcom's not really into that sort of thing for these games, so it's just kind of a straight re-release. But still, very much worth your time if you've never played them. There was a pretty big gap of time between the release of the third game and the fourth game, which is Apollo Justice. He is our new protagonist. They were basically doing the whole time skip thing. We're going to go many years into the future. Phoenix Wright is a hobo now. He's got a daughter who's a magician. And yeah, we're playing as this new guy. There were a lot of mysteries set up just by this game's existence, and I don't really think that it worked. I don't really dislike this game or anything. It just, as a game that tries to have like a big overarching mystery that you want to see solved, it doesn't work at all. The final case is not good. The third case has a lot of problems. There's like a really bad motive, and there are just like contradictions and inconsistencies in the way it was written. The first case also, it's good at setting up the mystery of the whole game, but ultimately that mystery had no payoff, or it didn't have a very satisfying one in my opinion. So yeah, really the only case that I personally like in this game is the second case. It's a good intro to Apollo's world, I guess, if you want to say that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really revisit this game that often because it's just kind of underwhelming. I think there are some good moments and characters in it, but it doesn't work as a whole for me, so I do put it in the B tier. I'm not even sure how you can play this one. Maybe you can get it on your phone or something. I don't know if it's ever been re-released. And hopefully Capcom does re-release it, but yeah, it's one of the weaker ones in my opinion. This was followed up by a spin-off game starring Miles Edgeworth, the prosecutor. You play as him instead, and it's funny because I was very excited for this game when it was announced, but I think it's probably one of the least memorable games in the whole franchise to me. I can barely remember this game, which made it kind of difficult to rank the cases. Yeah, I don't know what it is. They definitely tried to do something different with the gameplay, and I don't have a lot of issues with that. But I do think that the actual cases in the game are kind of underwhelming, and it just doesn't work. Like, the whole point of being a prosecutor is that you're in the courtroom, but you're not in the courtroom for any of this game. So you're not really a prosecutor, you're just a fake detective, I guess. I don't know, there was just something about it that did not quite work, because it doesn't have any trial stuff whatsoever. I don't know, I guess it would have been hard to redesign the trial gameplay from a prosecutor's perspective, but that to me would have been more interesting than what I think they ended up doing here. But there's some neat ideas, and the final case, it is certainly a final case. I will say that about it. So yeah, maybe only play this if you're like a real completionist. This game also had a sequel that was not released in the United States, and I know some people are upset about that and all, but like, I never really had a strong attachment to this game, even though I do like Edgeworth and Gumshoe as characters a lot, so it's always fun to see more of them. It's going in the B tier. So yeah, there was definitely a big gap of time before we got the next game, which was Dual Destinies. This was on the 3DS, so there was a big bump in the production value for this game. It was handled by a different team, which is, I think, also true of the Investigations game, but that was a spin-off, so you kind of expected it. So there's some different creative leads here, but yeah, big jump in production in a lot of ways because it's in 3D now. And I do like this game quite a bit. It definitely felt like a good successor to the franchise. It is funny, they kind of ignore a lot of things from Apollo Justice, even though he is in the game, and he features very prominently. Yeah, this kind of felt like a fresh start in a lot of ways. And I do like this game, but it does also have one of the weakest cases in the whole franchise for me, which is the second case, which I think is mostly just bad because they did a horrible job translating it. Maybe that's kind of an oversimplification. You know, these games take place in the United States, in the West, but the second case of this game they had trouble localizing. And I don't know, I kind of wish they could have done more to fix that, but that would have required spending more money, so I understand why they didn't. And it's just kind of an odd case. It doesn't really work for me. It also just feels like it's all over the place. And you find out who the villain is in the intro cutscene, so even though it's a pretty long case, you know who the killer is from the frickin' first minute. Like, I don't know what they were thinking. So that's a bad case. Most of the other cases in the game, I think, are just kind of okay. The final case is very good, and the DLC case is also really great. That's a great case. I have some issues with the DLC case, but that's just because there are a few things that happen in the case that suggest that it wasn't meant to be DLC and that it was just ripped out of the game by some executive at Capcom, which is a thing they were doing at the time in their fighting games, but I don't know. I'm not really going to hold that against it too much. It is a good case. It's very worth playing. It has an absurd premise, but also has a really good payoff. They made an absurd premise work, which is really what you want from a mystery game. So yeah, good new mechanics. The new characters are okay. I mean, they didn't blow me away or anything, but I did like this game a lot, and it was good to have Ace Attorney back after what felt like a very long absence. And then that leads to the sequel, which came out many years later, Spirit of Justice. This is in B tier. I don't really know if this one was worth the wait. There are a lot of things in this game that I enjoy. I like the idea of going to a foreign country. From a story perspective, there was a lot going on in this game, and that's kind of the weakness of it. While I do like a lot of the new ideas introduced, and I like the new mechanics, the payoff for everything is a little awkward. Some of the cases in this game are incredibly long, and then others are incredibly short. Like the second case, it just felt like it was cut short. The fourth case is trash. It's the worst case in the whole series, in my opinion. The game would literally be better if we didn't have that case. It's so awful, and it also has the same problem as that case I mentioned from the previous game, where it felt like, oh man, we can't translate around this really Japanese concept, so it's just gonna be whack. Yeah, it just isn't really that great, despite having some moments that I remember very vividly. The fake Steel Samurai song is fantastic. That track, anytime somebody plays that track when I'm around, I'll just start laughing. It's so funny. This is kind of an odd one, though, and it's been a while since we've had a game. You know, this came out and this is the last one, not counting Japanese ones that we never got, and I'm so frustrated that we never got those, because I don't think these games sell poorly, but they just don't feel like translating them. And yes, I know that some of the games are prequels, and they're like sort of Japanese, and blah blah blah. I don't care. Just give them to me. I want to play them. And you might think I'm forgetting something, but I'm not forgetting anything. The final game on this list is the Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright crossover game that was actually released before a couple of the games on this list, but I never played it until very recently. The reason for that is because I kind of just got really impatient without any new games, and the creator of Phoenix Wright, Shu Takumi, he left Capcom recently, but he hadn't really worked on a Capcom game that came to America since this game. And you know what, that's not even an accurate statement, because Capcom didn't even publish this game. They just didn't seem to have any interest in it. Shu Takumi basically went to go work on this game at Level 5 Studios, who do the Professor Layton games, which I'm not very familiar with. So for whatever reason, Capcom was not willing to release this game worldwide, which is why Nintendo ended up doing that. And I could be getting my dates slightly wrong here, but I believe this game came out in Japan before Dual Destinies, And then we did not get this game until after Dual Destinies came out here, which was a while later. So there have been some issues with getting these games on time, I guess, which has been kind of frustrating. But yeah, I kind of avoided playing this because I was not familiar with Professor Layton, and I kind of wanted to experience one of his games before doing a crossover. But that never happened because I'm lazy. So I played this game very recently, and you don't really need to know anything about Professor Layton to enjoy this because there's not really a whole lot of Professor Layton references in this game, just like there's not a whole lot of Phoenix Wright references in this game either. And it's not even close to being canon. You know, I enjoyed this game, but in a weird way, it was kind of the most frustrating experience I've had with any game in the franchise, to the point where it feels difficult to talk about the game's story without just spoiling everything. So all I will say is that I loved the courtroom mechanics. There are unique courtroom mechanics in this game that I think are great, and I think some of them are in the unreleased games, and I would love for those to be released so I can experience more of those mechanics because they were very, very fun. The Layton gameplay, I'm not completely sold on. It's a little weird to me. It doesn't feel all that satisfying because it's like, oh, let's do a puzzle. But this is just like a puzzle that's not really happening. We have no way to explain why we're just doing this puzzle now. We do it, and then we get to the next narrative beat. I wish the puzzles were more integrated into what was actually happening, but I understand that would have been very difficult to do. But maybe I'll play another Layton game soon, because I did like the ideas presented, so I'll probably try some of those on my own time. As for the story, I love the premise. It was a great premise, having the game take place in basically a medieval village where magic exists, so most logic that you would try to employ in a Phoenix Wright game does not work, and that was very entertaining. You have to really change up your ways of thinking. That said, many of the explanations for why things are happening in this game make my brain hurt in a way where I can't accept them, and I can't believe them, and I know they're ridiculous. I just can't. I've played other mystery games with insane mysteries, like the Zero Escape series. If you've ever played Virtue's Last Reward, that's a game that throws insane twists and insane mysteries at you. But by the end of the game, I was like, okay, I accept this. This is fine. That did not work here, but I applaud them for trying. So this is a really weird game that you should try if you're a completionist. I can't speak for Professor Layton fans. Maybe this is what all their games are like, I don't know. But a pretty whack game. And I'm putting it in B tier because I just don't know, man. I can't see myself returning to it. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of hard to talk about these games in general because they're so story-driven. And they're not really that different from one another in some ways. So I would suggest trying to seek out as many as you can, but I would encourage you to do so through legitimate means because I want to see the series get more support. So legitimately buy copies of these games if you can. I myself, even though many people have told me to do this, I have not bothered to go and look at the fan translations of the unreleased games because part of the fun of these games is how well they are translated. Because even though I've knocked a few slight instances of problems with regionalism here, these games are fantastically translated, and that's where a lot of the humor comes from. So I want to see more official translation work, and so I don't really bother with fan subs or any of that stuff. It's just not what I do. I don't encourage piracy or any of that thing. So the best way that you can support this is to buy the Ace Attorney collection that is on basically every platform, and hopefully we'll get more re-releases because I would love for the 3DS games to get ported as well, because a lot less people have played those, I feel like. So check them out. They're worth checking out. Even the ones that are a little lower on the list here, I'd still recommend looking them up. So again, I'm going to put up the list of the cases for people who are familiar with them. You can have a look at that. That's all I really have to say about Phoenix Wright. Go buy the Ace Attorney games because they're fun. And I will see you later. I don't know how many more videos there will be, as we're approaching the holidays, but maybe there'll be one or two. I would like to work on another big project, hopefully not a 2-hour project, but a sizable project nonetheless. And of course, stay tuned because there will be a Y2K follow-up once all of the Y2K content is released, which hopefully will happen in a month or two. So please stay tuned for that, and I'll see you later.